Charlatan or not? Welcome to my new series. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Adam Nessum, and I review health influencers, possible charlatans, and have an interest in the longevity, anti-aging, obesity medicine, and sports medicine space. In this video, we're going to be discussing Brian Johnson, who is known for his Blueprint protocol that went viral about 3 years ago. He is well known in the anti-aging space as the man who pays over $2 million on his routine, and he invests a lot of money into building his what he calls Blueprint protocol. Now, I've been critical of Brian in the past, and I don't necessarily think just because I'm making a video and critiquing certain things that justifies someone as being a charlatan. I think that as we are continuously getting information, the world of research in this area is constantly changing, and even I myself will make claims that maybe are not always accurate. So the way that I'm going to be defining charlatan, we're going to take the definition from vocabulary.com, which states charlatan is a quack, a person who is trying to deceive you with false claims. Beware of charlatans who try to sell you access to the fountain of youth or to a Ponzi scheme disguised as an exclusive investment fund. Charlatan is one who pretends to possess knowledge he or she lacks. So what we're going to try and do is assess the threshold of, is someone genuinely putting out information that they believe is true and has genuine good intentions, or are they purposely putting out misleading information in order to make a profit off of vulnerable people? That's really kind of my threshold, and I've gotten some feedback myself for being critical of people like Brian, and my goal is not to personally attack anyone, and it's really just to approach the claims from an evidence-based perspective. And so I think some of what he does doesn't make sense for the average person to follow, but I think I have a newfound perspective on him and definitely think that overall his intentions are good. And I really came to that conclusion after watching a podcast that he did with Dr. Mike. So we're going to react to that podcast. I think Dr. Mike does an excellent job of interviewing Brian Johnson to figure out why he does what he does, what's the reasoning behind this pursuit, and also gives him, and it comes from a non-judgmental questioning approach, and it gives Brian Johnson a opportunity to answer questions that I myself have had, and I think he does so in a thoughtful way. And I'll leave my conclusion until the very end on whether I'd say he's a charlatan or not, but I think that this is a great breakdown of overall what his thought process is and why he's doing what he's doing. So let's take a look at a couple clips from this podcast.
The reason why it's puzzling to me as a physician is because I see how flawed science is currently.
Yes.
And how a lot of data confuses us at times.
Yes.
Like prime example of false flags on tests that then require follow-up, or interventions that are problematic. Like I've read about you receiving colonoscopies earlier than the traditional recommended screening period of age 45.
I didn't.
You didn't?
I didn't know.
Oh, okay.
I did a pill cam.
Oh, you did endoscopy, a
Yeah.
colonoscopy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you don't do colonoscopies?
No.
Okay. And is there a reason why you chose the pill endoscopy versus traditional
because the
colonoscopy?
polyp detection was high enough that we thought it was a decent coverage, and the risk of death, I think it was like 1 in 10,000 on the colonoscopy.
Mm-hmm.
So we felt like the risk trade-off of the detection was better for the pill cam.
And then you discount the part of potential intervention and prevention aspect of colonoscopy. Like if there is a polyp, you can remove it, versus on the colonoscopy, you can't do that.
Yeah, the pill was such a benign thing. I fasted, I took some laxatives, I did the pill, and then I drank laxatives for 6 hours, and then I got the 40 or 35,000 images or whatever it was, just to get a baseline of what do we think we can find here. And it was pretty good technology.
Yeah. And was there anything interesting that you took away?
Nothing.
Perfectly
Yeah,
clean.
perfectly clean. Yeah, but an interesting video.
Yeah.
You're like, but I mean, to your point, like,
So I think that this quick segment is a good example of showing that Brian does actually put a lot of thoughtfulness into what he does to himself. Dr. Mike brings up a good point because there's a big push in this space for aggressive screening, right? Like we're going to get the full body MRI or we're going to get colonoscopies earlier than the current medical recommendations. Now, the problem with that on a population level is if you have so many people getting, let's see, these full body MRIs or these extra screening tests, you might find stuff that would have otherwise been benign, and then you do other interventions. For example, you try to remove something that then has a complication. And so what ends up happening is there will be negative effects, possibly deaths from excess screening. So it's very careful, these guidelines, to weigh the benefits of not screening too early and going looking for something. Because if you full body MRI someone, you're going to find something. Even if it's like, for example, you find a rotator cuff tear coming back from, like, I'm in the world of sports medicine. But if you don't have any pain from that rotator cuff tear, you might not necessarily want to treat it. Similar thing if you might find some early signs of prostate cancer that maybe someone then ends up working up too aggressively, which is worse for you than if you did nothing, because a lot of prostate cancers can just be monitored. So from an individual level, if you really want to do these excess screenings, I'm not completely against it. I believe in healthcare decision autonomy and you being able to have access to these tools, but I don't think from a population level right now, it's best recommendations. We'll see as things change. And I think that's the key when approaching Brian Johnson, is he's doing stuff individually for him, but I wouldn't necessarily take everything he does as the end all be all and follow it to the T, because there could be negative consequences as a result.
I agree with you. For me, the science doesn't need to be true eternally for this to make sense in my mind. Like, we all know the science is going to move. Some things I do today are not going to be good ideas and it'll transform to something else. Totally agree with you. Like, that's what has always happened. To be naive to think otherwise. What I'm really trying to say is,
so that's an awesome statement that he makes. And this is where I'm starting to switch my thought process on Brian specifically. A lot of people that I would say are charlatans or pushing pseudoscience or doing things with bad intentions, they really will never admit when they're wrong, and they'll make these bold claims and not be open to changing. They'll take a side for some reason and then they'll stick to that. Being open and saying things that I do are not going to be correct is very foundational to being a good scientist. And also, especially if you're going to be pushing these things, I think overall he's saying, these are the things I do. I'm documenting that journey. You can follow them, but I'm not always going to be right. And that's key. That's huge.
this is the first time in history it could be taken with a serious face. And that's what I'm trying to do. And so, yes, I'm going to make mistakes. Yes, it's an N of 1. It has all these kind of limitations. Totally aware of all this. And I'm not going to try to make the argument otherwise. What I'm trying to say is it's a worthwhile endeavor.
So I can respect that. First off, one of my criticisms in the past is that he is an N of 1, meaning if you're running studies on yourself, there's only one patient to go based off. You're basically a case study. It's not a randomized controlled trial and maybe one day he'll implement some of his strategies as randomized controlled trials. But you can't just say Brian Johnson's biomarkers went up or improved from doing this intervention. That means you should just jump to doing that intervention. That can be dangerous. And so it does seem like he's very self-aware of what he's doing. He understands the limitations. At least this is the first time I'm hearing him speak about it in this manner. And so that definitely adds credibility to what he is doing, at least in terms of me saying he's not a charlatan.
Endeavor.
Yeah, I could see pushing towards that endeavor to some degree brings tremendous value. The concern I have is there are people that look to you as a figure who's very influential, who is looking great for your age and even for younger than your age, and say, I want to do that too.
Yeah.
And they don't have the means of doing certain things outside of the pillars that you mentioned of sleep and exercise. Yeah. And they start spending their limited time, budgets, et cetera, to try and chase that dream. And my thought is, anytime you're prioritizing something, it's at what cost? Right? So when someone asks me, like, is diet soda bad? And it's like, for whom, for what condition? Is it replacing what? Like, all these questions pop into mind. So is this a worthwhile endeavor for the general public? Because for you, who am I to say what's right for you? That's completely your world, right? You have bodily autonomy. But the question is, what should the general public be taking away from your journey?
Yeah. I mean, let's imagine we pose a question. Someone sees someone else gets wealthy through this thing called capitalism, and they want to start doing it too. And they start doing it at the cost of all other things. Is capitalism a good thing?
Is capitalism a good thing for whom, in what condition? I mean, like, I would ask all those same scenarios.
Yeah. I mean, it's like any pursuit for humans. They lock in on a given game they want to play, whether it's their own wellness or whether it's trying to make money or whether it's trying to get social media followers. I mean, there are these pathways any human can take for any system they want.
In those pathways, a lot of times what ends up entering into the space is survivorship bias of someone who has been lucky, taken the right path at the right time, et cetera, and then people try and follow that route one-to-one, and oftentimes it doesn't happen because, N of 1, as you precisely put it. So I'm just trying to find what can I take away from your journey to bring to my viewers, to my patients, that's going to actually make an impact that is valuable to them in the long
Yeah.
run, besides the philosophical thought experiment of what if we don't die?
Yeah.
Because I think that is a valuable thought experiment. I think there's so much value into thinking beyond death. And I think
Yeah.
you said that a lot of the cultures in the past, they lived very differently and they evolved very differently. And that's true to some degree, but there are some unique through lines, like the thoughts, what happens after death, the fact that almost every culture had some sort of substance
Yeah.
that allowed them to escape reality,
Yeah.
whether it was alcohol, opium. You know, there's these human flaws in us, and that's always been largely celebrated. But now we're taking the other approach and celebrating potentially getting rid of human flaws.
Yeah.
Right? Is that the
Yeah.
correct way to think about it?
Yeah. I mean, what I suggest for your patients is that I'm making the observation that we humans have largely seen ourselves as martyrs for certain causes. So people take better care of their pets than they do themselves, better care of their kids than they do themselves. They take better care of their professional advance, their wealth accumulation. So people prioritize a very long list of things higher than their personal wellness because they think they're achieving this immortality of legacy and contribution through these other vectors. And what I'm saying is the age of martyrdom may be coming to an end where it may make sense to put your mask on first. That means going to bed on time. It means exercising. It means trying not to engage in bad vices. And so it's really a fundamental shift of how we understand ourselves. That's why Don't Die, it is a philosophical argument, but it also informs what you eat for breakfast and what time you go to bed and whether or not you drink alcohol and whether or not you smoke a cigarette. So it's extremely practical on a day-to-day basis.
Well,
So I think he talks about this earlier in the podcast, but some of his main pillars to start beyond when you get into all the fancy stuff is getting good sleep, exercising, don't smoke, don't have vices. And that I can 100% get behind. It seems like he's looking into every possible protocol, actually, that can overall improve his wellness. And it's a very interesting project. And I think that overall, he seems very excited about it and genuine in his pursuit. And this is very fulfilling for Brian Johnson. I don't think sticking to that strict of a protocol is going to be fulfilling for everyone. But if what he does motivates you to improve your overall life, and you stick to those original pillars, I think that's great. Do I think then you have to go buy his supplements? Not necessarily. Are they going to be bad for you? Also not necessarily, but the evidence with supplementation, it's just so hard to really see what is necessary. There's very few supplements, unless you actually have a nutritional deficiency, that we would recommend as physicians. And that's not because we don't want you to take supplements if it helps you, we do, but we try to have evidence-based guidelines that we recommend things by. And so if there are randomized controlled trials that show certain supplements will improve your overall health, and I do believe that's what Brian Johnson tries to take his data from, as many randomized controlled trials as possible to then create his supplements and implement these protocols. But it's very hard to sift through the conflicting research out there, and he definitely seems to be trying to be on the forefront of this agenda. So I think Dr. Mike does a really good job of questioning him, talking about how kind of my similar thoughts. What he does is awesome for him individually, but some of the things he does, like he goes on to talk about like this plasma pheresis transfusion that is just not necessary for any individual to do, or other very interesting procedures that he puts himself through. I don't think that everyone needs to follow that or should take it as the gospel. With that said, if you enjoy that and it's something that you want to really look into, I highly recommend doing your own research and really being well informed when you make these decisions. But my overall conclusion is Brian Johnson a charlatan? No, he's not. Does he show a way of living that has a lot of benefits? Yes. But does he also do a lot of things that are outside the box that I wouldn't recommend you follow? Also, yes, but at least I think I took away from this podcast that he acknowledges that as well, and he's not recommending for everybody to do all of these procedures that he also undergoes. So maybe I'm wrong on that. Let me know in the comments below. If you like this series, let me know who else I should make a video on, charlatan or not, and I'll see you in the next one.